Hi, I'm Mort Cooper, your host on Change Your Voice, Change Your Life. In studio with me, it's early in the morning, folks, here. David Walsh, who has suffered a condition called spasmodic dysphonia, diagnosed at UCLA Medical Center with the condition. It's not a very favorable condition to have. It's believed to be incurable, a disease, a rare disease. Nobody can find it. David, you went to see Dr. Burke at UCLA,
Yes,
chairman
I did.
of the head and neck division.
I did.
And what did he tell you when you went there?
Well, it was interesting because I had been to see, I spoke with several of his staff before I spoke with him. And they were actually very confused as to what the condition was that I had. Mm-hmm. And when I actually spoke with Dr. Burke a while later, mm-hmm. he had diagnosed me with what he termed incipient spasmodic dysphonia. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard of spasmodic dysphonia at all. Mm-hmm. And was told that the method of treatment for it was, well, first of all, that it was a neurological condition. Mm-hmm. And my questions were, well, when did this start? Is it hereditary? Blah, blah, blah. And the story was that people develop it in their mid to late 30s, that there is no known cure, and the only treatment for it were Botox injections in the vocal cords. Mm-hmm. And I'm a voiceover actor by trade, so I speak for a living. And I asked him, well, what would the side effects of something like this be? And he said, well, you would probably lose your voice for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I said, do you mean weak or lose? He said, lose, but we'll give you the smallest dose possible so that you have the minimal amount of voice loss. And I said, how many times a year would I need to do this? And he said, probably 3 to 4. So I stopped him and I said, so doctor, you're telling me that I would probably be voiceless for 12 weeks of the year, roughly. And I just kind of left and said I would wait to make the decision, and he agreed with that. But in the meantime, I spoke with my ear, nose, and throat doctor, Manny Zadeh, who actually had found information on you and had referred me the information, and that's how I came to speak with you and how we got here today. So.
My take on your diagnosis is not that you have incipient. I use the term.
Right.
As the doctor who initially used that term, breaking spasmodic dysphonia, the strangled voice, into 2 categories, incipient and full-blown. You have full-blown. Can you go back to the old voice?
I could go back to the old voice.
Would you recognize this voice?
It's one of those things that will absolutely blow your mind.
That is a voice that I would use, a lot of us in the voiceover business use for movie trailers. And as you've told me, and actually when I was speaking with that voice, I was speaking completely from the lower throat.
Right. In contrast to the face.
Right, exactly. In contrast to the face, I could go back to that voice right now.
With force.
With force.
Use
and
it with force.
There's no life. There's no life to it.
No, but tell me where you're feeling it when you do it.
Oh, completely in the lower throat. But it's
give me a dose of it, yeah.
Columbia Pictures presents.
How long have you been doing that?
At least 5 to 7 years. At least, probably about, it's probably at least 7 years.
Somebody told you to use what is called the fog voice 10 years ago.
Yes, but I think also there's a part of that where I was completely unaware of diaphragmatic breathing and really understanding the whole issue of speaking from the mask, and I think there was a confusion as well. I think what happens, and we've talked about this, is that what people in my business don't understand is they know you're doing something wrong, because what ended up happening with my voice is it became a very plodding, lifeless voice. And what the notes I would get from people would be, you're paying too much attention, because I couldn't even speak. I couldn't phrase words with plosives like P's and T's and B's and D's. And so I would hesitate on those words, which would make a documentary that you're narrating literally fall apart because you weren't.
You were preforming, David, extensively.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds of words and sounds.
And we made a list in the office of those words.
You made
too.
the list.
4 or 5 pages of them.
More.
If not more. Yeah, that was just a sample.
So you're afraid to talk. You couldn't get this sound, that sound. You were avoiding.
Exactly.
Your communication was affected. And you continued to exhaust yourself in the booth trying to read copy with this fog voice. Give me that fog voice.
Well, actually to get the fog voice, it was a...
Where were you putting your voice when you did the voiceovers in the booth?
To be honest, right now when I'm doing it, I'm putting it in the face, which is because
where
knowing that it was actually putting it more from the upper chest and the lower throat, which is exactly where you shouldn't be putting it.
Right. That's the strangle voice. You didn't have incipient, in my opinion. You had full blown.
Yeah, yeah. It really made an incredible difference when I actually started to understand your process of treatment.
Which is what?
Which is very simply speaking from the mask from the face and in the whole facial area as opposed to from the lower throat.
You've gone through a series of good intentioned doctors. What did you go through?
Well, where this all actually started was, I would say, probably about 5 years ago when I was working for a television network, and I actually started to have trouble with words beginning with an H, soft consonants or beginning with a vowel. And I couldn't, and they would say to me, Dave, I think you hiccuped on that word. Let's go back and redo that line or something. And that was fine, and I didn't really pay attention. And then I would say probably maybe a month or two later, I started to realize I couldn't project my voice. Mm-hmm. And I started to get really strong sinus infections when I would eat. Mm. And I eventually found out from several doctors, one thought I broke my nose. I did a CAT scan. I ended up going to an ENT who diagnosed me with laryngeal reflux disease, which he said was different from GERD because GERD focuses on the stomach. Laryngeal reflux is phlegm that comes up, acid changing to phlegm and into the sinus passages and affects the vocal cords. And in fact, I did have a vocal strobe, and they showed swollen cords and all of that.
Did anybody ever tell you that the mucus that you were complaining about is coming from the squeezing of your voice?
No, it was coming completely from acid reflux.
No. Do you have acid reflux?
I did. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say I did is I actually had surgery to correct it called fundoplication. Mm-hmm. What was told to me was that once I had the surgery, that the vocal problem would be cured because the acid was no longer coming up. And after about 4 months post-surgery, which was in April of 2007 of this year, I realized my voice was no better. And I went back to...
So the surgery didn't change what...
Well, it didn't. It cured the reflux, but it didn't cure the voice.
Well, that's what you were concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I make my living. Mm-hmm. So I went back to my ENT, and I told him, I said, this is no better than it was. And he said, you need to be patient. And I said, trust me, I know my body, and I know my business. And that's when I was referred to Dr. Burke in April of 2007. And I took a few months after the meeting with him to go back to my ear, nose, and throat doctor and say, we need to look for another alternative, and that's how we came to you.
You know Shadow Stevens, who's a famed entertainer.
Yes, I do.
And he had spasmodic dysphonia.
Yes.
I work with him.
Yes. And I actually...
He had his voice back. He's cured for many, many years.
And he told me that, and we actually... I did email Shadow and told him, the situation, and Shadow, bless him, called me 45 minutes after he got the email and said, I understand exactly what you're going through. He said, Mort is, speaking about you, saying he's the real deal, and this is where, this is really it's a good thing that you found him, and so that's